Hello, friends. Welcome aboard the Round Trip Stories podcast, where we share stories of moving around the world and back again, reflecting on the lessons we've learned along the way. My name is Melissa.
And my name is Tracy, and we are so glad you're joining us for today's episode. Welcome back to part 2 of our interview with Justin Lau, adult third culture kid who grew up in Japan, originally from Singapore, and now working as a worship leader in a church in London. After finishing up a deep-rooted education in his international school in Japan, he had to move back to Singapore for mandatory military service. It was then that he felt more Japanese than anything and felt comfort in the few friends who took the time to understand who he really was as a third culture kid. So buckle your seatbelts and make sure your tray tables and seats are in their upright positions as part 2 of Justin's round trip story gets ready for takeoff.
Welcome back. We are on part 2 with Justin Lau. And Justin, can you please give us a little bit of backstory again? Remind us where you lived abroad and how long you were there. When and why did you leave? Where you landed, and what you're doing now.
Yes. So, hi everyone, for those who haven't listened to the previous episode. I'm Justin, and I am a 32-year-old Chinese Singaporean who grew up in Japan, but is currently based in London. And I moved to Japan when I was 3 months old. I lived there for the first 18 years of my life. I went to an international school primarily. And when I graduated from high school, I had to leave Japan and I had to go back to Singapore, my passport country, in order to serve my national service. And that was my military service. So when all my friends from international school went off to college in the States or stayed in Japan, I had to leave what was my home for the past 18 years and return to Singapore, which was where I was born, where my parents were from, but I had never lived an extended amount of time there. And I ended up going back and was waiting for my enlistment date. So I landed in Singapore July 2009. So I graduated in June, landed back in July, was really hoping to get to enlist in August or September, because it was a 2-year commitment. It was a mandatory 2-year national service. So I thought, okay, if I get in, I do my 2 years, then I can go off to college like the rest of my friends in 2 years' time. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, that didn't happen, and I was waiting, and I got my enlistment date, which was the 5th of February 2010.
Tell us a story about that transition to life there in Singapore and about what that was like.
Although I grew up in Japan, I did go back to Singapore every summer for summer holidays with my family, but that would be a couple weeks at max. And so on one hand, I did feel I knew Singapore. Mm-hmm. You know, I could understand Singlish, which is what they speak, a Singaporean accented English. I loved the food. I knew my extended family, my grandparents, my aunties, my uncles, my cousins there. I knew the best bookshops because I love reading, and I knew the best places to go. You know, it wasn't like I was completely new to Singapore. And so I thought, okay, I'll go back, do my national service. It'll be all fine. Well, that wore off after a month. Mm-hmm. And I realized, okay, I do not really know Singapore to the extent that obviously I know Japan or know another context.
Your parents and your younger brother were still in Japan, right?
So my parents and my brother moved back with me to support me.
That's good.
Okay.
So that was big. So yes, so it wasn't just me. I think the things that were really difficult may seem really trivial, but they were really big for me. So in the previous episode, we talked a little bit about train stations, and we joked about, you know, the convenience in Japan. But Japanese society is so well structured and organized, and the service is impeccable. All of it is top class in the world. Mm-hmm. And when I went back to Singapore and I didn't have that, it began to grate at me. Now, for example, in Japan, Tokyo is the busiest city in the world with the busiest public transport system. But everyone is so well-mannered and knows societal rules that even when you've got a packed train, and maybe some of you have seen videos of people, the train conductors pushing people into the packed trains in Japan. That's very common. I grew up with that.
Seen those videos.
Even when it's packed and the platform is packed, everyone is queuing up really neatly in 3 lines at each door. And then when the train arrives at the platform, everyone effortlessly lets all the passengers alight, and then they all go in. And when I went back to Singapore, this did not happen. And it grated me so much. I just couldn't take it. I just didn't understand why, when the trains arrived at the platform and the doors opened, all the passengers on the platform would try to push in before letting people alight. And in my mind, I was thinking, it doesn't make any logical sense. The most efficient way was to let people come out and then you go in.
Right.
Now, looking back, I understand, because Singapore is a multicultural society and, you don't have those things. But at the time, those things that seemed trivial actually began to build up in me. And they began to build and build and build. And before I knew it, I started seeing Singapore in a really negative light.
Yeah. And you were talking about Singapore being a multicultural society, but Japan is a very monocultural society. And it's interesting how it seems like that's more organized, whereas multiculturalism might be a little bit more chaotic because you have different value systems existing in the same space.
Exactly.
And maybe even in addition to the wider variety of values, the organization and the structure is such a high value in Japan. But everybody also has the same understanding of how to achieve that organization and structure.
Exactly.
So because let's say somebody from a different place might also value organization and structure, but if they have a different idea for how to accomplish that, you would still have a little bit more chaos, more confusion, more whatever. And so, I can totally see that would have been difficult. Do you want to share anything about what it was like when you finally did your national service? Was that just easy, no problem, or was it a big challenge as well?
It was massive. So in addition to having to return and adjust to my passport country, I found myself within a quite hostile environment, you could say, where you had to be strong and you couldn't cry or show any weakness or emotion in order to succeed and make it.
And had you been raised that way at all, or was that very different from the way that you were raised in your family and in your community?
I actually didn't find the discipline part of the army difficult. I was already very disciplined, very motivated, so that wasn't an issue. But it was the existential part of it. It was less the physical part because I was strong and healthy and fit, and more the mental toll that it took. And what I mean by that is, as these little things began to pile up and began to cause me to see Singapore in a more negative light, one of the things that contributed to that was that I would meet Singaporeans who just didn't understand that I wasn't quote unquote Singaporean. The more I felt, I'm not Singaporean culturally, I didn't grow up here, the more I clung on to the fact that I'm Japanese. I grew up there because we all need something to cling on to in our identity. And because Singaporeanness was not that, it was Japaneseness for me. But people just couldn't compute that even though I was Singaporean by passport and nationality and I was back to serve in national service, they just didn't really understand, and sometimes they didn't accept that what I said about myself. So I would say, I'm not Singaporean, and they're like, what do you mean? Of course you are. And that was really, really difficult. And the more that happened, the more, as an 18-year-old, As an immature 18-year-old, I can say in hindsight, but as an 18-year-old, I dug in my heels, I pushed back, I became more stubborn and more hard-hearted towards it. And I remember one of the first initiation days in the army, and there was a sergeant major who was shouting at all of us, saying, "You're gonna die for your country." And I almost burst out in tears, because in my mind, I was thinking, I didn't choose to be here. I was forced to come because I'm legally obliged to. Now, it's maybe worth noting that if I hadn't returned to Singapore to serve in the national service, then I would have been blacklisted and I would have been arrested and put in jail the next time I set foot in Singapore.
Wow.
And I couldn't afford that because I knew my extended family was there and I knew probably my parents would retire in the future. So that was not a bridge I was willing to burn.
Right.
But in that moment with this sergeant major shouting at how you're going to die for your country, I was thinking, I am still here and I'm doing my best and trying to achieve as much as I can, but this is not my country. Yeah. There was just such a disconnect with what was being said and spoken over me and what I felt.
Yeah, and Justin, as you've talked to other TCKs, third culture kids who went off to university, how was their experience compared to yours? Because yours was quite harsh, right? Yes. You're moving back to your passport country and you're going into a military environment, and you're being told you're going to die for your country. That's pretty extreme.
Yeah, my friends, my other TCK friends are having their own identity crisis moments, you know, probably not to the extent, but still enough for it to be quite tumultuous. You know, a lot of my friends who went to the States for college, who, you know, we grew up with the American education, the American curriculum, we spoke American English, but they just realized, the American culture is completely different because they had grown up in Japan. Or those who stayed in Japan, even those who were fully ethnically Japanese but went to an international school, they also felt, oh, I'm not fully Japanese anymore because I went to an international school and I'm westernized. So they themselves were going through it. And I was, you know, we were sharing. My friends, again, were a lifeline during the army. And when I did get to go home on the weekends, I would Skype them for hours and hours. And that made me feel like I was less alone. But I definitely had perhaps a more hostile and harsh environment to wrestle with these questions.
So tell us, Justin, either a story or about something that helped then or has helped since then with those transitions and struggles.
With my identity crisis, I mentioned how a lot of people imposed their notions on me as Singaporean who didn't quite understand what I meant when I said I'm not. Thankfully, there were a handful of people who did accept me for who I was. And they are still friends to this day. And that, again, friends being the saving grace, where they didn't try to impose a category or a label on me. But when I said I'm Japanese, which technically and factually is not true, but when I said I was Japanese, they were like, yeah, okay. And moved on and continued to learn about me and interact with me and deepen the relationship. And that was such a relief and a surprise as well, because the majority of Singaporeans didn't quite understand. But this handful of people, shout out to people like Tiffany and Sufyan, who just accepted me for who I was. And what that helped me realize was it wasn't just other TCKs that I could create those deep connections with. So I mentioned how I kept in touch with a lot of my TCK friends, and I was zealous in my keeping in touch with my TCK friends, because I knew that I wasn't gonna meet many of them from now in my life. But it also continued to show me that no, I didn't have to live online now for the rest of my life. I could connect with people who were monocultural, but who were also very open-minded, who were very accepting, but who were also very aware, you know, globally aware, globally minded as well. And that really, really helped. And since then, it's been a journey, because on one hand, I have, starting at the age of 18, I built up a lot of this bitterness and hatred against Singapore for how I would have described at the time, taking 2 years of my life away from me, and taking me away from all my friends. But on the other hand, meeting Singaporeans who have become really good friends. And what that has helped to do was to help me not generalize Singaporeanness as one giant monolithic entity, but even within that, obviously, every single person is unique, every single person is different, and that's helped me. I'm 32 now, so over the past 14 years, it's helped me on my journey of healing and reconciliation with Singapore. To the point where I'm now really happy and comfortable saying I am Singaporean. Whereas only 5 or 6 years ago, I would have been loath to have said that. If people asked me where I was from, I would say I'm from Japan. And if they probed a bit further because they were actually interested, then I would say, well, I'm Singaporean, but I grew up in Japan. Now, I still do use that, but I'm very happy starting with I'm Singaporean, but I grew up in Japan.
That really does say a lot, that you're happy to own that now and to wear that identity.
I think one thing that really helped me was I had a mentor in Japan, this couple, and they were Christian and they were praying for me. And they really felt the sense of, or they challenged me to think about your heritage, your cultural heritage. What do you inherit from that? What legacy comes from that? And they pointed out that actually Singapore is a very multicultural society. It's innately multicultural. It was founded on immigrants from Chinese, Malays, Indians, Eurasians. And that fits very much with who I am and what I'm passionate about today. That multiculturalism. And perhaps there's something that I've inherited from my ancestors, from my heritage, which I've never really got in touch with or thought about, but maybe there was something there. And that triggered a curiosity to get in touch more and learn more about my Chinese, especially my Chinese heritage.
Okay, so Justin, it's time for our TCK Choose Your Own Adventure question. So you get to pick one of these questions to answer. And the first one is, how often do you think about being or having been a TCK now, and how much does that affect your life now? Second, what are some favorite experiences of connecting with other TCKs that you may have had? Or third, do you have a favorite funny story about your time abroad or transition back or anywhere? So which one of those questions do you want to answer?
I think the first one, about how often I think about TCK and how it affects my life now.
Okay, great.
So as I mentioned, I am currently based in London. I've been in the UK for the past 12 years. And I'm really thankful for a lot of that healing that I mentioned about in regards to Singapore, which thankfully has also happened whilst being away from Singapore. I don't know what it would have been like if I would have stayed, but I came over to the UK not thinking I was going to be here long term, but just coming for studies. But I've ended up staying because I really love it here. And I studied at a university in the north of England called Durham University. And it was my first time coming to the UK. I've been to the States before to visit, but I'd never been to the UK, although obviously I knew about it in Harry Potter and all of that fun stuff. Fun fact, Durham Cathedral is one of the locations where they did film Harry Potter. So
that is a fun fact.
There you go.
But when I moved to the UK, I fully expected myself to assimilate into Britishness, or what I now know in hindsight, what I realize is white Britishness. So Durham in the north of England is 97% white majority. So that it fit my idea of the UK. And obviously there were a lot of international students. So it wasn't like I was, purely surrounded by white people, but actually I had a lot of good Asian friends as well when I was in university. one of the TCK superpower is adapting to cultures. So I just thought I needed to wield that again. I remember though, there was once I was in a small group at church, and I started talking to this person. Her name was Jo. And within 2 minutes, she turned to me and said, "You're a TCK, aren't you?" And I said, "How do you know that?" And she was like, "Well, you literally just completely unloaded deep about your life in 2 minutes." And only a TCK does that. So there were moments like that which made me remember, okay, yes, I am a TCK.
So was she also a TCK? Is that why she recognized that?
She was married to a TCK.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, and why? So why is that true? Why do TCKs just give their life story or unload and get deep in a very short time?
Because we don't know when the next time we'll see each other is. So, yeah.
Make it count.
So yeah, I was in Durham, but there weren't many TCKs, and I didn't think about it much because I was trying to become more British, per se. And then I remember one of my friends, Brad, who went to the same school as I did in Tokyo, so he was a TCK as well. He came up to visit me in Durham, and he asked me, "Where are all the brown and black people?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" And he was like, "Well, in Bradford, there are a lot of people from, other parts, different ethnicities." And that was the first time I clocked, oh, Britain is actually multicultural, which seems super obvious at the time. But because I didn't know anything about the UK, my first experience of the UK was in Durham, which was white majority. I just thought Britishness was this white Britishness. And fast forward to now living in London, which is super multicultural. You've got people from all nationalities, all backgrounds, all cultures and ethnicities. And I love it. I'm thriving here. It's the same as the love for an airport, right? Where no one belongs, everyone's in transit, therefore everyone is together. You get that same feel in London. But I have noticed over the past decade in the West a greater openness to not just accepting but embracing people's ethnic backgrounds, ethnic heritage and cultural backgrounds, which is absolutely beautiful. Yes, there can always be, space, there's always room for improvement, but this push for diversity has really helped me to be fully who I am with all my various influences. So go back to the start, I was trying to be Japanese, and then in international school I was trying to be more American, then I go back to Singapore, and then I'm trying to be this and trying to fit, and then I come to the UK and now I'm just like, I am a mishmash of everything and I'm proud of it. I don't have shame. I am proud of the fact that I am a bridge between Western and Eastern cultures. I'm very Westernized, but I'm also Asian. And so being a Westernized Asian in London has actually brought back some of those thoughts, I think, in a more holistic and healthy way of thinking about my identity, rather than being pigeonholed and trying to fit within a narrow category or label that either someone else or myself impose upon me.
All right, tell us a final story about how your time abroad continues to add value or flavor your life now.
I don't know if I have a specific story, but I do have kind of general, life lessons learnt, which I'm glad to say I can now look back in hindsight and see it a bit more. And I mentioned earlier about being a bridge between Western and Eastern cultures, and that is something that I still feel I do to this day. The fact that I am Asian, but I'm also super Westernized, means that I have a uniquely insider perspective on both the West and the East. And this allows me to have deep understanding of people from various backgrounds and also the ability to deeply connect with them. And, my thing is all about, we need to love each other more. And the only way you're going to love someone is if you get to know someone.
Yeah.
And for me, if I can help, because my context right now is in the UK, is in the West, I've done a lot of empowering ethnic minorities in the West, especially in the Western church. That's something I'm very passionate about. I'm very passionate about helping people understand that they don't just have to assimilate and acculturate to a certain Western way of being, but what they bring from their cultures is just as valuable and just as important and can make just as big an impact on people if we're willing to learn from each other.
Yes, Justin, and the other podcast that I listened to that you were on, you were talking about how the global church can teach each other, right? The global church can teach the Western church.
Yeah.
Non-white people can teach white people. Yeah. It's just like our non-British people can teach the British church. It's so important because we all have gifts of God to share with others. Yeah. We're part of the body of Christ.
Yeah.
And we should, because God gives us our gifts for a reason. Okay, Justin, what is one last word of encouragement or advice you can give to our listeners?
TCKs will always think about, wrestle, struggle with the concept of home and, grounding in physical locations. But the thing I will say is that people make a place. People make a home. For me, this was really grounding for me in my early 20s, where home is where those you love and those who love you are. And that can change, that can be flexible, that can be fluid, but it's not tied to a physical location. And so invest in those relationships, because that's what really grounds you. But I do want to say, for any TCKs listening, there is hope for grounding in a physical location. And it's taken me 32 years, but I have got there, and I have found the place where I want to settle. I want to put down my roots in a way that I've never have wanted in the past. And it's a learning journey. It's learning to do life with those around you day in and day out, no matter how messy it gets, with you can't just escape, which previously maybe we could have done a bit more. But there is that beauty of being able to ground yourself somewhere, but also with others. So that would be my last word of encouragement or advice to your listeners.
I love that. That's so good, Justin. Thank you so much, Justin, for taking the time to meet with us, to talk with us, and share your story with us. It's going to be really good to be able to share this with our listeners. Thank you.
Thank you.
As we land this interview, we hope that you have been inspired by Justin's TCK stories. Justin describes his return to Singapore as a massive challenge and double adjustment, both to his passport country and to a military environment. His friends and mentors continued to be a lifeline, listening and challenging him to consider his heritage and legacy. Once in a UK university and now in multicultural London, Justin is at peace with being fully who he is. He says that he is a mishmash of everything, and he is proud of that. No matter what leg of the journey you are on, friends, we are so grateful you have brought us along with you.
Come back next time for a preview episode where we take an aerial perspective of themes we've heard so far in our TCK Round Trip Story series. We will also introduce our upcoming TCK guests to help you preview what is ahead. You won't want to miss it.
If you're enjoying our podcast, we'd love it if you would leave us a review in your podcast app. And don't forget, you can visit our website at roundtripstories.com to see photos of our guests and to join our email list. And of course, tell your friends to travel the world with us. No passport, no packing, and no goodbyes required. Thanks so much for listening, friends. We'll see you next time.